All right, welcome everybody around the world. Welcome to all my subscribers, and hopefully, welcome to Rabbi Tovia Singer. So, very quickly, I want to say that I myself have been on YouTube for 7 years doing my teachings, and in this time, I have become very well acquainted with Tovia Singer. I've watched a little bit less in the recent years, but especially years ago, I watched almost everything that he had on his channels, even Tanakh Talk, I think it's called. I used to frequent their live streams and participate in the chats and everything. So I am very well acquainted with Tovia Singer's position, his arguments, and everything. So my little quick, friendly introduction to Tovia Singer, real quick, is before I get going, is that this is a challenge, unlike and much simpler. And I mean, Tovia Singer, honestly, like if he gives me the time to hear me out in this video, which I really hope he does, I won't be quoting tons of stuff and boring people in this video. This is just gonna be a quick, short, little synopsis thing, a little bullet point list of some few points that I'm going to make to help introduce the topic. And if Tovia is interested, then maybe we can arrange to talk one day, right? And then he can hear more. But what I want to show is that the true original Christianity, as is taught in the New Testament, okay, this is no creation of mine. I'm not some person who's created some crazy branch of Christianity of my own invention, but it's taken 20 years, and I published my systematic theology a few years ago. So I do have a published systematic theology. That's one thing for Tovia to know. So I'm not just somebody with YouTube videos waffling nonsense, okay? And it does have excellent reviews, but nonetheless, I do have a published systematic theology, okay? And like it says on the cover, something I think Tovia Singer would appreciate is that this theology is aimed at Christians, of course, and the subtitle is Correcting the Apostasy of Modern Christianity, because this is revealing the original and true Christianity. So what Tovia Singer would find strikingly different, okay, if he takes up my challenge, okay, is that as I will show and as I can thoroughly 100% prove, okay, that the actual original Christianity, before all the other people tainted it over the centuries later, but the original Christianity, as was stated and given by Jesus in the New Testament, the disciples and the apostles, including Paul, I can show and I can prove that, believe it or not, that original Christianity is so-called kosher. It is, to say the word it's compliant with Judaism is not fair to the Christianity. It is kosher, okay? It is legit. That's a better word to use. It's not something that is, it's compliant with Judaism. No, I can't even say they go hand in hand, because if anybody, if Tovia takes the time, if any other rabbi even takes the time to hear me out, I can show to you very, very efficiently, very, very thoroughly, that everything that is taught theologically in true Christianity, in the actual original, is kosher. There is nothing different. And in my little synopsis bullet point list, I'm going to go through here. I'm not going to be quoting verses and boring people and taking lots of time. With these little simple logical bullet points, I will show everybody why I'm saying it's kosher and it's compliant. There is, believe it or not, there is no theological difference. The only difference comes down to who the Messiah is. Okay, so at the end of the day, if Tovia was to take me up on this challenge, it wouldn't even really, I don't even think it would be a real debate, because if Tovia hears me out, then he will see that 99% of the common arguments that he makes against every other Christian branch that he debates, 99% of those arguments don't even apply. Okay, they're inapplicable. So if Tovia or any other rabbi has, their usual lineup, like I've heard a million times, of the things that they themselves have said a million times, and well prepared arguments against certain Christian theological points, out of all of that material that they always present at every debate, okay, or in any of their teachings and videos, 99% of it literally does not even apply. It's inapplicable to true Christianity. Okay, and that's what I really want Tovia and other rabbis to take the time to hear me out on. Okay, because it might sound absurd at face value, but it's because Tovia and the other rabbis and Judaism as a whole in general does not have the correct understanding of what Christianity is. They only understand what the churches have been teaching for about 1500 years or so. Okay, and these heretic Christian doctrines that have cropped up have given Jesus a terrible image and Christianity a terrible image. And unfortunately, that terrible image has been absorbed by all the peoples of surrounding nations over this 1500 years. So everybody looking onto Christians starts to think, oh, well, all Christians are like Catholics and they worship statues, or all Christians believe in a human blood sacrifice. But this is simply not true. That is a misrepresentation of what Christianity actually is and what it was and what it should always be. The true Christianity, as I'll show my little bullet point list now, okay, is kosher. Whether you like it or not, it is kosher. And the only difference, like if Tovia or any rabbi was to sit down, hear my evidence, and debate me, okay, they would, I'm telling you now, shake my hand and say, I've never heard Christianity presented like this before, but this is compliant. This is kosher. There is nothing contrary. There's nothing in violation. It's completely kosher. And the only thing that the rabbis could say is that they still just don't want to accept Jesus as the Messiah. But that, as I would argue, is immaterial, because as I'll show in my bullet point list here, I got some really good logical and philosophical points. So let's get going into the list real quick. Okay, and just keep in mind, I'm not here today to quote things, to validate things, and show the evidence to validate what I'm claiming. I'm just giving my claims. And if Tovia or any other rabbi is interested, I can assure you that I can back up my claims. I've got it in the published systematic theology. Okay, so here we go. These are the claims here, right? And by the way, again, this is actually even supported by, historians and all of that. Everything that I'll say is actually supported by the experts, believe it or not. Okay, so I'm not just making up wild claims. This is supported and it is theologically scriptural. So here we go. So like I say here, ironically, the true Christianity is kosher and cannot be blamed as being invalid, separate, contrary, or unbiblical. Okay, expiatory Unitarianism cannot be stumbled on any theological point, and will indeed stand solid through any scrutiny that will come in such a debate. Okay, and I will boldly say now that this is so true that, in fact, that if one was to claim that this true Christianity, expiatory Unitarianism, if you were to claim that it's a lie, it would be akin to saying that Judaism itself is a lie. That is how compliant. It's not, again, compliant doesn't do it justice, right? It is one the same, believe it or not. So if you want to say that Christianity, meaning true Christianity, is a lie, it is the same as saying Judaism is a lie. Because if you want to say that the theological principles of true Christianity are a lie, you are saying Judaism is a lie. Okay, because they have the identical theological principles. So anyways, okay, theologically, like I say, the two are one truth and cannot be separated. Okay, and the only difference, like I said, which could be scrutinized still by Judaism, even after hearing all the evidence, would be their expected and continued denial that Jesus was specifically the Messiah. But they would not be able to say that the true Christianity, expiatory Unitarianism, is different or invalid theologically from Judaism. Okay, they would have to agree, because it's simply a fact that it is valid and compliant, and they are one the same. Okay, and next, let's see. Okay, I already mentioned that point. Well, I'll read it anyways. However, the reasons for denying Jesus overall, historically, are rooted in well-rooted and broad misconceptions of the actual Jesus and New Testament theology of Christianity, which is actually, sadly, partly to blame on the Christians who created all those false heretic pagan theologies that took root starting in around 300 AD and then became prevalent, which caused the gross misrepresentation of true Christianity. And unfortunately, this misrepresented image was absorbed by every other onlooker around the world for 1,500 years. Okay? And those heathen Christians prosecuted, persecuted, and even executed the true non-Trinitarian, Unitarian, original Christians. Anybody who supported the actual and true original theology was uprooted from society by these peoples, unfortunately, fellow Christians. Okay? So going on. In the true original Christian New Testament theology, Jesus is not God. Okay, I devote about 30, 35 pages or so. It's the opening chapter, if I'm not mistaken, in my book. Okay, in the systematic theology. So right off the bat there, this is Unitarian, this is non-Trinitarian. So that alleviates hours of potential debate with any rabbi, such as Tovia Singer. There's no need to debate about Jesus being God because he was not God, right? This is just a claim. Like these bullet points that I'm reading out here, there's just logical points in summary fashion to help present my claim, but I can validate my claim, like I said, right? I'm just reminding people, right? So, so like I said, the true original New Testament Christian theology, Jesus is not God. Okay, point number one. The next thing, which I devote 30 to 60 pages in my theology over multiple chapters, is showing that original Christianity, Jesus was not a sacrifice or even an atonement. And this is so blatantly proven with the evidence I can present. It is literally inarguable. No, to argue it would be like saying we don't live on planet Earth. We live in, a mushroom kingdom on planet Mars. You know what I mean? It is clear as day that Jesus was not a sacrifice or an atonement according to the actual New Testament theology. Okay. The next main point. So that takes out another, 3, 4, 5 hours of possible debate between the rabbis and myself on this matter. Okay, so Jesus wasn't God and he was not a sacrifice or an atonement. In fact, as I teach, as I show in the systematic theology, as I show in my 150 plus videos, okay, it is heresy to claim that Jesus is God. It's heresy, and these heresies of the highest form, to claim that Jesus is God, to claim that he was a sacrifice or an atonement. These are heresies. I've taught that for 7 years. It's in the systematic theology. Okay, so I know that Tovia Singer and every other rabbi out there would shake my hand on these 2 points. So next, okay, and again, these aren't my claims. This is the Christian theology. Next, Jesus was naturally born as a seed of man. The New Testament declares this in a number of places, using different terminologies, which all concrete in. And a few of them, specifically, he was the seed. And the word seed there in the Greek is the word for sperm. Okay, he was the product of sperm and egg. He was a biological human, naturally born. That's what it testifies to. Okay, the myth of a virgin birth and all this pagan hocus pocus, this came later. Okay, so next, the rabbis would not, that alleviates, again, hours of potential argument and debate over, misapplication of Isaiah verses and such. Okay, so the next thing that we have in common is that the true Christian theology literally is, as a theology, as a doctrine, okay, it teaches that Judaism, the law of Judaism, is for Jews. It is binding upon Jews and they must keep it. This is what true New Testament theology, what it actually says, okay? And it's theologically confirmed in the book of Acts, where they literally got together, Jews and Gentiles, and debated over the theology, and their conclusions are shown in triplicate, and it affirms that Judaism is binding for Jews as law, and Gentile law is binding for Gentiles. And it actually says there that if you're to teach a Gentile to keep Jewish law, it is to subvert their soul. And I'm sure that every rabbi out there could agree with that. Okay? And this is true New Testament theology. So Judaism is for Jews, Gentile law is for Gentiles. Jesus affirmed this. Like I said, if I wanted to get into validating things, that's what this is for. I could go on for hours in each of these points. Okay? There's endless validation for this. This is blatant, simple fact. Okay? The next point is that it wasn't just Jesus or this and that there in the New Testament. It is consistently across the board, as I show and prove in the systematic theology here, that it wasn't just Jesus. It is Jesus, the New Testament, the disciples, and the apostles, even Paul, the controversial Paul, okay, all of them agree theologically one thing, okay? There are not separate, theologies within the New Testament. This is a gross and uneducated misconception for anybody out there, and Tovia has made videos bashing Paul. That is, I'm sorry, but an uneducated, and I'm happy to show the validation and the scripture and to educate on this. And I'm not trying to be disrespectful, right? But it is an uneducated claim to say that Paul taught that the law is gone and so forth. As I famously claim in my book, there are 35 verses from Paul's mouth alone, just from his mouth alone in the New Testament, that say that the law is in effect, okay? And that there is a law that is binding, okay? So, and not just any law, but specifically the ones I just said. In fact, he's the one who wrote Acts and specified the theological confirmations. Okay, so overall, let's just read that one bullet point again. So the original true Christian New Testament theology, Jesus is not God. He's not a sacrifice or an atonement. He was naturally born as a seed of man. He taught Judaism is for Jews and Gentile law is for Gentiles. That is exactly Judaism. The rabbis would shake my hand on that. There's nothing there that, you know what I mean, that is compliant, that is in agreement with what they teach and believe in Judaism. So that spares half a day of debate. Okay, if I was to just read this book alone, let alone a full, thorough debate, to read this book takes about 8 hours. If I was to read it aloud, let alone expand upon the points and explain them. Okay, so if we're talking about a thorough debate, we'd be here for a day. Okay, especially if you're letting the other side present things as well, that doubles the time. Okay, but like I've shown here, I've just alleviated 3/4 of a day because we don't even need to debate over those things. I could read the evidence to help show and validate that my claim is true, which I can fully happily do, or you can read it for yourself, get the book and read it, but that's a blatant fact. So the true original Christianity taught exactly what Judaism has always taught, that Gentiles have to keep Gentile law, and they shouldn't keep Jewish law, and that Jews should keep Jewish law. That's exactly what Judaism says, and that's exactly what Christianity says. So where's the difference? Now, in this, the rabbis will say, oh, but Christianity teaches there's a new law, there's new this. All of that is hocus pocus, fluffy marshmallow nonsense. That is not Christianity. That is not New Testament theology. That is church concepts and dogma that have been peddled for 1,500 years. It is not scriptural. And again, I will say that you should only read the original translation of a book. Let me take a sip of my coffee. The church has bastardized the scriptures, the Tanakh and New Testament scriptures, by altering words, inserting things, and taking things out. I proved it. It's in here. Some of the evidence is in here for that. Okay, but it's a blatant fact. What you got to do is look at different Bible translations, different versions. For all of my studies from day one, since I was 18 years old, and for all of this book, every verse in this book is from the original translations. Okay, so the direct original translations. There's no word alterations, there's no insertions and removals. And I don't think that Rabbi Tovia Singer and the other rabbis have probably ever actually read the original translations of the New Testament. Maybe in few specific sources, they'll go look at a few certain things, but they're not sitting down reading the original translation of the New Testament. If they did, they would see some profound revelations, right? Like just for one example, right? I'm not quoting things, but just one example. The word atone, atonement, atoning, and atoned don't even occur in the New Testament. They don't occur. So all those churches that have said Jesus was our atoning sacrifice, that's not even scriptural. And I go into 30, up to 60 pages in this book covering that topic broadly, okay? He's not just in that one point, right? But he was not an atonement sacrifice. He was not an atonement, period, okay, at all. But the churches have falsely taught that and thought that, right? But that's some of the best and simplest proof to just say right off the bat. If you don't believe me, go look it up. Go look in the original translation. Those words don't even occur. There's no grounds to even theologically say that he was an atonement. The words don't even occur. Okay, but I bet you that the rabbis have never picked up the original translation. But the rabbis, ironically, they teach that Christians never pick up the Hebrew Tanakh, and they don't know Hebrew, and they can't know what it really says. They don't know the complexities of Hebrew. Well, right back at you. Unless you go and read the original translation and even the Greek and so forth of the New Testament, then don't pick up these altered versions and then try to scrutinize Christianity based on these altered versions. You see my point? If you want us to apply that level of understanding to Judaism, then do it likewise. You can't have it one way, right? And I don't think that it has ever even crossed their mind to analyze Christianity through the original translation. I don't think it has ever occurred, because if they did, they wouldn't have made at least 25% of the claims that they've made against Christianity, any of the rabbis, including Tovia Singer. Now, next, this is important too. How are you saved in Judaism? You are saved when you reform. You repent, you reform from your sin, you stop doing it, you turn to God, you stop doing what is bad. God will forgive you of your sins, make you white as wool, and so forth. Right? That's Judaism. Well, that's exactly what the New Testament affirms. It teaches Reformation in 53 verses, in over 53 verses. But the word reform is used in teaching 53 places alone. Okay? In fact, the baptism that John did, John was said to be the reincarnated Elijah. That was foretold by Malachi. That's what Jesus says. Okay? So Elijah was allegedly John. What was the Elijah supposed to do? But turn the hearts of the people back towards God. What did John do according to the New Testament? It says in 4 or 5 places that he specifically was doing a baptism of reformation unto the remission of sins, which means that John was going around teaching people to reform to God in order to be saved. When Jesus was baptized, he underwent the baptism of reformation by John. Okay? That is specified. And in the book of Matthew, I think it's chapter 20, verse 23, possibly, Jesus instructs the Christians to do the baptism that he did, which was the baptism of reformation. Okay? But more importantly, there is a verse. It's either Luke, I think it's in Luke. It's in the book. It's in my videos. Best verse that all the churches have overlooked, all the rabbis have overlooked, where the gospel is verbatim stated. Okay? When the disciples and the apostles were meant to go out to the world, it was the penultimate point at the day of Pentecost or whatever it was, and they were being commissioned to go out to the world and to teach the nations to turn to God. And it says right there that the gospel is to reform, to go out and to teach all the men, all the nations to reform. Okay? That is how you are saved. That the teaching of Reformation is throughout the New Testament. Anybody who says it's not the theology of Christianity is being foolish and uneducated. Anybody, whether Jewish or Christian, who says that. And unfortunately, most of Christianity is foolish because of this, right? The simple fact is that the gospel and the theology of Jesus in the New Testament is to reform in order to have your sins forgiven, in order to be approved by God. And that's exactly the theology to be saved according to Judaism. So again, same exact thing. Nothing different whatsoever, period. Okay, next, the New Testament, as I prove with 2 chapters in the book here, the New Testament does not teach that hell is eternal. Okay? How many rabbis have I seen? I saw one the other day. Okay? Watching during the live stream. I won't say which rabbi it was, out of respect. Complaining and, going against Christianity, mocking Christianity because they teach eternal hell, and eternal hell is not taught in the Tanakh, and it's a made-up church concept. Well, guess what? It is a made-up church concept, but it's not a New Testament concept. The New Testament nowhere. Okay, I got the details in the book, right? I'm not going to quote it. But offhand, I don't even think that the word eternal or everlasting even occurs in the New Testament, right? But more specifically, what I do know is that I posted every single reference to Gehenna, hell, Hades, lake of fire, anything to do with hell. Every single verse is in here. You can see it with your own eyes, and clearly, as it reveals in these 2 revolutionary chapters, hell is not eternal. The word for it is temporal. It is age during, which means that it's temporary. So every single occurrence where it talks about the Gehenna, the hell, the lake of fire, this and that there, none of the words even say it's eternal or everlasting. None of them. So it's a lie to say that Christianity teaches eternal hellfire. That is simply not true. It literally teaches temporary. Okay? And it also teaches, like Judaism, about biblical actual reincarnation. Jesus says that if you're not worthy and you die and you fail at judgment, that you go on to receive a second death. You can't die a second time without living a second time. Okay? So again, that's another thing that we have in common with Judaism, that the churches, again, have overlooked because they went apostate. But the churches going into apostasy was foretold in the New Testament. Paul warned that the end of days will not come before Christianity falls into apostasy and the followers and the Christians become people of sin, accustomed to doing sin and still thinking that they're justified. Okay, but Israel is guilty of stuff like this. Everybody does stuff like that. But it was foretold, so it's no surprise, right? It was forewarned. And what we see, the confusion that we've seen for 1,500 years is the result of that. Right? So hell is not eternal. The lake of fire is actually a metaphor, as is abundantly proven in my systematic theology. Okay? The Gehenna, the lake of fire is a metaphor. Now, I won't go any deeper here. It's some pretty deep stuff, right? But anyways, it probably interests rabbis who are into, deeper studies and all of that. But anyways, next, true Christianity does not teach that Judaism was wrong or bad or that it ended or was replaced. That's what the fake churches have taught. The New Testament does not teach that. Like I already claimed, New Testament affirms Judaism is for Jews, okay? And it's binding forever. Jesus said so in Matthew 5. Jesus said you can't take one dot. Jesus said you can't take one dot from the law. It'll always be here until God changes it with the heavens and the earth, right? Which is what Judaism says, okay? So it was not replaced, okay? And the New Testament teaches theologically. It says that Jews get salvation before Gentiles do. And it says that all of Israel will be saved. So how can you claim that Christianity replaced, erroneous Judaism? That's not New Testament theology. New Testament theology says, hey, Jews get salvation before Gentiles do, and that all of Israel will be saved, and that Jews should keep following Judaism. That's actually what the New Testament theology says. That's a fact. So the rabbis can't have any problem with that. So the next point is that true Christianity does not teach that the new covenant replaced the second. I just watched the other day a video with Rabbi Tovia Singer talking about this. Well, guess what? In the New Testament, where it's talking about the new covenant and the old covenant, it's literally just simply quoting Jeremiah, where it says that his laws are put on our heart. And then Paul elaborates how the laws of God are put on our heart and that we should always keep them. There's no mention of Christianity coming in as a new religion replacing Judaism. That's ridiculous. That is not what's taught in the New Testament. And anybody who believes all these contrary things to the points that I'm making, you've been deluded. That's all I can say. Christian and rabbis alike have been deluded by these false claims and misrepresentations because they have not done the actual study. Both Jew and Christian alike have not done the study of Christianity properly. They haven't looked at the original text. They haven't taken it seriously. They've just gone on the whim of what the churches have been saying for 1,500 years. Okay, after a bunch of pagan Catholics forced everybody to become Trinitarian heathens, believing in a blood sacrifice of a human. That was forced on the people through torture and pain of death. Okay, but anyways, so the new covenant doesn't replace the second. It's the law of God put on our hearts. It's the Jewish law for Jews on their hearts. It's the Gentile law for Gentiles on their hearts. That's what it teaches. So the rabbis can't have a problem with that because that's Judaism. Next, there is no law. This is an important philosophical point I want to make, that there is no law against a Gentile or a Jew believing and following a kosher rabbi in his teachings. There is no law in the law of Moses saying, hey, you're not allowed to follow a kosher rabbi. You know what I mean? And by kosher, I mean, he's teaching the right thing. So there is no law, therefore, against following a kosher Jesus. So if anybody was to take the time to hear out the validations, to either read them yourself or a rabbi take me up on the challenge and hear me out and have a discussion and all of that, and you heard the evidence, the validations for my claims here, okay, you would have to agree that Christianity and what Jesus, the disciples, the apostles taught is kosher, okay, because all the points I just made are actual factual facts. It is true. So it is kosher. So what Jesus taught was kosher. So the only difference is whether you want to still believe whether Jesus was the Messiah or not. But technically, I would like to say that's immaterial. Even as a Christian, the Messiah is not as important as what the Messiah's purpose is. If he didn't come with a purpose, and there's no purpose to the Messiah, you follow me? Right? Even Jesus said they didn't come here for his own purpose. He came here to teach the word of God and so forth. All Christians know that. Okay, so the importance isn't about the Messiah. It's about the purpose of the Messiah, the function of the Messiah. That's the important thing. Okay, so even if you still want to say, look, I believe, okay, fine, the original Christianity, it is kosher and all that there, cool, fine, whatever, but I still don't believe that Jesus was the Messiah for various other reasons, which I won't waste time getting into in this video, right? I could say for another video another time, right? But like my point is, there's no law against a Gentile or a Jew believing and following a kosher rabbi in his teaching. So even if you don't believe Jesus was the Messiah, you would have to acknowledge that he is a kosher rabbi and that his teachings, true Christianity, are kosher. And therefore, because he's a kosher rabbi, is not against the law to follow his teaching. So there should be no penalty or offense for a Gentile or even for a Jew to follow the teachings of true Christianity, because it's literally what Judaism says. You follow me? I mean, it literally is. It's not compliant. It literally is. That's my point. So it's not a violation for Jew or Christian to follow the kosher Jesus. Right? Very important point. Now, next, I just want to point this out. To disrespect a kosher rabbi would be offensive, right? As would disrespecting kosher Jesus, right? The sad thing is that a lot of people have disrespected Christianity and Jesus based on the understanding of these pagan versions of Christianity. Instead of actually looking at the original and the true, they've ended up for 1,500 plus years disrespecting Jesus, who is actually the kosher, who is kosher. So what the takeaway is that in effect for all this time, everybody's been slandering a perfectly kosher teacher. Now, while that might not be a divine crime, perhaps, although, this is a separate argument, but there is that verse from Moses where he says, a prophet's coming after me from the people, and you have to follow the words because his words that he teaches and the law that he will give is from God, and you have to obey it or else you'll be punished, right? And I believe some in Judaism even believe that this is about Messiah, but whatever, that's a separate argument. We don't need to worry about that, right? But the point is that, which point was on here? At the end of the day, even disregarding that, you shouldn't go around slandering a teacher who is teaching what is correct. And Jesus did teach what was correct. So to slander him, even if you don't believe he was Messiah, that's offensive. You follow me? Anyways, next. Israel, as recorded in Tanakh, did kill and reject and imprison and beat anointed prophets who were anointed from God. This is undeniable. Okay, it's a fact. The Tanakh teaches it, right? So by that very notion, why would it be impossible that Israel could reject a prince, the Messiah? Why is that so impossible that they could reject a prince? Okay, he's prince unto God, he's king unto the people. My point is, it's not impossible that Israel could reject the Messiah, who is Prince King, okay? Because look at the precedent. Israel already killed and rejected, beat, imprisoned anointed prophets. Why is it so hard for them to do such to an anointed prince or king? Why would that be impossible? There is a precedent. 1 Samuel 10:19, and ye today have rejected your God, who himself is your savior out of all your evils and distresses. So right there, 1 Samuel is showing how Israel rejected God. But how can we believe the claims of the rabbis when they say that, Jesus is definitely a fraud because he was rejected? If he was real, he would have been approved by the people. Is that necessarily true? I don't think so. We had God-anointed prophets who were rejected by the people. Where's the difference? Right? You see my point? And in Genesis 49:6, in the great prophecy, it says, into their secret come not, O my soul, unto their assembly be not united, O mine honor. For in their anger they slew a man, and in their self-will eradicated a prince. In the great edict unto the sons of Israel. Okay? But more importantly, it had that verse where it rejected God. So if Israel rejected God's law many times as well, not just, so to speak, they rejected God, but they rejected God by rejecting his laws. So Israel rejected God's laws, they rejected his prophets, and it even says they rejected God at times. Okay? So Israel would be fully able to reject the Messiah. If they can reject God, of course they can reject the Messiah. If they reject God's word, of course they can reject Messiah's word. If they reject God's law, then of course they can reject God's law as spoken by Messiah. Why is it so impossible? But Judaism makes it sound like, oh no, it's a definite sign that he was a fraud because he was rejected and he died. That's not true. That is not a valid statement. Next. Okay, the fact that Messiah dying does not debunk that he is Messiah. Why? Because all human beings die, don't they? Right? Every human being dies. Doesn't Judaism and the rabbis teach that Christianity is false because they make Jesus out to be some super being? And the rabbis always claim, and they read the verses, that the Tanakh teaches that Messiah is just a man. He's a son of man. Well, yeah. Well, Jesus identified himself as a son of man. New Testament identified himself as seed of man in about half a dozen places. Okay. And last time I checked, human beings die. We all die in some way. So why does it disqualify Jesus as Messiah? Because he died. That's ludicrous. Of course he would die. Of course any human Messiah would die. Unless Judaism wants to start contradicting itself and saying that, oh, well, Messiah would be superhuman. But then you can't lobby that accusation against Christianity. So my next point is that Jesus did not claim to be the way. This is a huge article of contention with Judaism. They always portray Jesus as, well, because they think Trinitarianism is what defines Christianity, is also, right? But they're always attacking the concept of Jesus being, like this funnel for everybody to go through to reach God, right? And they put that down. And I understand, because that's not what actually the New Testament teaches, okay? Jesus does not claim to be the way so that he could get all the glory and attention. That's my point. He literally acted as a conduit for all the loose wires. So when you have a whole bunch of loose electrical wires and you want to organize them, you gather them together, you lace them properly, and you put them into a conduit tube. And that gathers all the wires together and directs them towards wherever it's going, the conduit box, the outlet, the switch, right? So he directed everybody to God. That's what the Messiah is supposed to do. That's why he said, you have to come through me if you want to go to God. Because everybody else in the world back then, pagans, they were going to their own gods, to their idols. He was saying there's only one way to God, right? And he wasn't saying that I am the one way because I'm better than God or I am God. He wasn't saying it like that. He's like, I am the conduit. You come to me, listen to me. I will show you there is one God and how to get, how to be approved by him, that is reformed to be saved. He will show you the right way, whether you're Jewish or Gentile. He will show you the way to God. That's why he is the way, okay? And when he made that statement that nobody, however it says it, nobody can be saved or everybody has to go through me in order to be saved, that's what it's talking about, okay? And other scholars have pointed out as well that this was actually an address to Gentiles, because back then all the Gentiles being pagan, like I just said, they had these concepts, there are many ways to God, many gods, many avenues. But the point of Jesus saying that was not to attract attention to himself, but to act as that conduit to point towards God. That's the point, right? Two more points to make and then I'm done. Okay, this is very important. I devote 1 or 2 chapters, very deep chapters in this book here. But true Christianity also does not at all teach that we suffer and die because of Adam. Again, I heard a rabbi, might have been Tovia Singer or another one, in the last few days and all the stuff I was watching, talking about this again, mocking Christianity and misapplying verses that Paul said. Okay, I thoroughly cover that and debunk it in this systematic theology here. Okay, true Christianity does not teach that we suffer and die because of Adam. That chapter written by Paul, I thoroughly dissect in this text here. Okay, verse by verse and word for word over pages. And right there in front of your eyes, you can see what the words actually say and in the original translation, and it is completely opposite to what the churches have claimed. The verses actually say that we do not, and I'm not saying because they changed the word yes to no, but through all the twisting and manipulation that they did with the different versions, the original shows the complete opposite of what the churches have taught and what the rabbis think of Christianity. It teaches that we do not suffer and die because of Adam. That's actually what it teaches. Okay, and throughout the rest of the New Testament theology, as I explain it here, it is affirmed that we are here suffering for our own crimes. That is proven in the systematic theology. Okay, so that is what is revealed. We suffer for our own crimes. There's so many verses that corroborate this. Okay, Jesus said numerous places that we will reap what we sow. Okay, we have to forgive in order to be forgiven. This is eye for an eye. This is the law of Moses. Okay, it's just in a different perspective. People always think, oh, what Jesus taught is completely opposite. No, I pointed out, once you understand the truth of how God works with, biblical karma, if you want to call it that, and punishments and possible reincarnation as punishment or as a necessary means to be saved in a subsequent life and whatnot. Once you understand that in the metaphorical uses of Gehenna and Lake of Fire in the New Testament, once you've read the systematic theology in those deep chapters, you'll see clear as day, okay, that we are here for our own crimes. And there's abundant scripture, Old Tanakh and New Testament, that back this up 100%. Anybody from Judaism or Christianity who says that we're here because of Adam suffering, that's apostasy. That is disrespecting God, portraying God in a bad light. Okay? That's why on the title here I got Theodicy, defending God. Okay, so we don't suffer and die because of Adam. That is a lie. That is a gross misappropriation and interpretation of the actual words in the actual text. Okay? And like I said, it reveals in those verses that we actually suffer for our own crimes like Adam did. Not because of Adam, but like Adam did. Adam suffered for his crimes, so are we. We're not suffering because of his crimes. I can tell you that much. Now, final point. The original, I already made that point. So that's it for my logical points here today. Okay, I can back up, validate every theological claim that I made. Oh, Jesus isn't God. No sacrifice, this, that, there. Right? He wasn't a human sacrifice. I mean, he wasn't a sacrifice. He wasn't an atonement. All those key points and all the others. Validate it for yourself. You can read it. Watch my videos. You can watch them for free. Most of the material, not all of it, most of the materials in my videos, various videos, take you a long time to watch them. A little easier to read the book. It's more concise. Okay, but I'm urging Tovia Singer, any other, rabbi out there who wants to take me up on this challenge, come do it. 100% friendly terms. No need for debate, because at the end of the day, I fully expect Rabbi to say, whoever it might be, hey, you know what? You're right. That's kosher. I expect them to say, I still don't believe Jesus is God, but like I already pointed out, well, that's okay. You know what I mean? New Testament does not say that Jews have to accept Jesus in order to be saved. Jesus says that they have to keep Jewish law. And in that Jewish law, it does not have a law saying you have to follow Jesus. Okay? That's the argument that I can make in favor of Judaism here, I have to say, right? Okay, and as I also pointed out, there is no law, and it wouldn't be a law against the Gentile believing in Jesus if he was a kosher teacher, okay, doing what God has appointed, okay? But I believe that he was the Messiah. If you don't want to believe he was the Messiah, those are my concluding points. There's no violation for a Jew to follow Jesus's teachings. You're still Jewish. It's not going to violate it because what he taught is kosher, right? There's no violation for a Gentile following Jesus because he was a kosher teacher and he taught what Judaism teaches. You see me? You see my point? It's compliant. You can't say it's different. There's nothing to bash true Christianity on. Okay, and the reason I've dubbed it expiatory Unitarianism is because every other blinking denomination of Christianity is either worshiping Jesus as God, like a bunch of heathens, or like a bunch of heathens, they're all thinking Jesus is a blood sacrifice. You know what I mean? That's 95%, 98% of Christianity diluted by their apostasy, which is why I wrote this book, to help save the fellow Christians, not to convince Jewish people, to save the Christians, right? So I'm sure the rabbis would shake my hand and agree and say, hey, this is great. They might even invite me to come and help teach, because you know what ticks me off? Just like it ticks Tovia Singer off and the rabbis, they hate seeing these Christians lining the streets in Israel, telling the Jews that Jesus was a blood sacrifice for their sin. They're out there like ancient heathens promoting human sacrifice. You know what I mean? That's what it is under the guise of Christianity. And you know what? God and Jesus, pardon my French, would be pissed off with Christians who are doing that. Just like how Jews and Muslims are pissed off with Christians for portraying Trinitarian and human sacrifice doctrine and all that there. Just how they're pissed off, God and Jesus are more pissed off, because that is not biblical, right? So ironically, the funny thing is I actually agree with Tovia. It irritates me when I see those silly, ignorant Christians out there in the streets of Israel going up to these Orthodox Jews and rabbis as if they would ever convince them of anything to start with, and trying to convince them that human sacrifice is going to save them. Right? The human sacrifice of God himself is going to save them. I mean, like I pointed out to the Christians before, that's Satanism 101. If Satan was told, hey, make the most satanic religious doctrine you could think of, Satan would say, oh, okay, well, let's sacrifice and kill God so that we can get away with our crimes. There you go. The most satanic thing you could think of. And that's what the Christian church has adopted, mainly because of the Roman influence through Constantine, right? But nonetheless, right? So, like I said, I really want to, I would love to see one of the rabbis take up this challenge. Anyways, I've got to go. God bless you all. Let's hope for the best. Let's hope Messiah and God come soon. Take care.